Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be asked to come back again this year after presenting Tales from the Barracks Walls last year as part of your programme. The Second World War has always been the most or closest world war. It has never been on my radar as being part of my research methodology, but when I was challenged last year or earlier on this year by Anne to come up with a lecture, I really dug into it because it's not exactly as easy to research as World War I stories, because lots of the records are still closed because people could technically be still alive, and definitely people who are descendants of the people who are included on the records would be still alive, so they're not as easily accessible or can't be accessed as easy. So that is a challenge. Nevertheless, we've managed. So look, this is my pen picture. Commandant retired in brackets. I don't know why I have retired in there. I'm no longer in the army, but I've never been busier, to be honest with you. My education comes from what we would call, in the modern sense, a professional military education. I left school in 1984 with a very ordinary leaving cert, but I still managed to retire as a senior officer out of the Irish Defence Forces, and that could only happen through the modern educational opportunities that exist in the Defence Forces, which included me being a student in Maynooth twice. And I managed to do a 3-year degree in 8 months almost, so no pressure there. So just to set the scene for us, because we can't just start talking about World War II without knowing a bit of where we come from. So the Versaille Treaty is where World War II started, really, isn't it? The treaty that was negotiated at the end of World War I in the Palace of Versailles, and it included, as a key point, a guilt clause which made Germany responsible for World War I. Germany was probably 20-25% at fault for World War I, certainly wasn't the only country at fault, but they accepted 100% of the fault, the guilt, and the reparation clause meant that they spent the majority of the rest of the 20th century paying for World War I. Germany lost a lot of territory, and their armies were forbidden to be big again, and a lot of other infringements on the social activities within the country, which caused a lot of unrest into the 30s, and we all know the story of what happened. Concurrently in Ireland, we were having, after 1918, within 4 months we were having our War of Independence, and we fought the good fight, and we basically, as far as I'm concerned, defeated the British here during the Anglo-Irish War, and we had a treaty ourselves, and that treaty negotiated a 26-county Ireland, a Republic of Ireland, an Irish Free State, which excluded the northern 6 counties, but also left treaty ports with under the command of the United Kingdom. They were Spike Island, Cove, and in the north, I think it's Lough Swilly, the three ports, and they would become very important because if you look at the reach that a submarine or a cruiser or a battleship could have into the Atlantic, if they could have a deep water post in Cove as opposed to being somewhere off the west coast of England, it would have been a much more superior location had those treaty ports still been part of the United Kingdom in 1939 when the war started. But in 1932 the government changed, and Eamon de Valera decided that he was no longer going to pay the reparations for the land annuity. So they were no longer going to pay for the money for the land that British landlords were given in order to pay them off to give the land back to Irish farmers. So that was no longer going to happen. And this here is Neville Chamberlain making a speech on tariffs being introduced against Ireland in 1932 because we wouldn't pay the land annuities. And that caused the tariff war between Ireland and the United Kingdom from 1932 to 1938. So tariffs are never a good thing, and we can see what's happening in spades right now. But part of the negotiated end to the tariffs was the handing back of the treaty ports to Ireland. And this happened in 1938. This is Bear Island, actually, and I've spent many's a summer camp down there, never actually getting in around the actual old fort itself, but there's ranges and all around there, and that was one of the ports handed back. It coincided with the coal and beef deal, so we would allow English coal to be imported to Ireland and they would take Irish beef. And as part of that then, the De Valera government promised to pay back £10 million instead of the £100 million that was owed. So if you introduce tariffs, you're going to have to compromise, and that's what happened. And Ireland came out of the deal pretty good. We got our ports back, and we got the lands for less than 10% of what was still owed for them. This here is a 70th anniversary of the raising of the first tricolour in Bear Island, the post there. And here, just in case, this here is an invitation to Tom Tracy, who was a very influential man in the Kilkenny area, and I recently had the good privilege to do a talk about Tom during Tradfest. And this is Tom being invited, and I love the way it's worded here. It says, on the occasion of the taking over of Cove Harbour by the defences and hoisting of the national flag on Spike Island. It doesn't say the handing back of Bear Island, it says the taking over, because that's what we did, we took them over. It was like a few years ago we had the 100th anniversary of the taking over of the barracks in Kilkenny. The withdrawing Devonshire Regiment didn't hand it back handily. That wasn't the way, even though that's how it was portrayed. No, we took it over and we took back our treaty ports, and from that time to then to now, the treaty ports were no longer of any use or available to the British post that period in 1938. And that would have its own problems for them less than a year later, because on the 3rd of September 1939, after Poland had been invaded by Germany, Britain declares war. And the very next day, Ireland introduces the Emergency Powers Order. And that made provision for the securing of public safety and preservation of the state at a time of war, and in particular to make provision for the maintenance of public order and the provision and control of supplies, and so on and so forth. So we didn't have a Second World War in Ireland, we had an emergency. And then we didn't have a civil war in 1968 to 1998, we had the Troubles. We don't do the language of war very well, but really what it was a Second World War within which we remained neutral. But that didn't mean our active army didn't become active, because immediately at that time, the Irish government had to create a plan to defend the country against armed aggression by everybody, whether it was the British coming in to take control of the ports again, or whether it was the Germans coming in to use Ireland as a landing stepping point to invade Great Britain. So we introduced our LDF, our LSF, the local security forces, local defence forces, and the Irish Army was massively increased. And you can see there that as a result of some 1932 purchases, our uniforms are very Germanic in style. We wore a German type helmet. That was known as the Vickers helmet. It was bought, 10,047 of them were bought in 1932. And we became very German-like in our style. De Valera seemingly liked the style of the uniform. And our Vickers machine gun there, I don't know, the car looks nice, but it's not getting far if the soldiers open fire. But in Kilkenny then, this is the Kilkenny Local Defence Force, because I didn't just want to start and crack on into the World War II story without talking about us, what was going on here. So this is the Local Defence Forces here. This here is Tom Tracy, and I'm sure some of you will know people within the picture who I haven't yet identified. And thankfully, Tom, because he was such a brilliant, he worked for Poe, Kiley and Hogan. He was very good with maintaining records. And this book still exists. Orla, Tom's granddaughter, has it here, and she was good enough to let me have a look at it. And I'd just like to call out some of the names here, because you know these are local names. Thomas DeLucre, he was in charge of the engineer section. Intelligence section was Leo McAdams. The communications section was Nicholas Purcell. The transport section was Michael Delahunty, sorry. The first aid section was Liam Darcy. The supply section was Edward Murphy, and Henry Bateman was the combat engineering section. Right, but it goes into more detail, it gives you their addresses. Parliament Street was Thomas DeLucre, Friars Bridge was Leo McAdams, Civil Lodge, High Street, Kells Road, Rosemount, Chancellor's Yard, Rose Inn Street, Road Terrace, Parliament Street, St. Kieran Street and Patrick Street. So you can see there was a very strong capability within Kilkenny for the local defence forces to be able to provide support to the army in the event of there being an invasion by paratroopers or by sea of a foreign force, be it British or German. And you can see other names. It goes into the sections then, and all the people. John, I'll just pick out a couple. James Grace from Rosine Street, William O'Sullivan from Parnell Street, Richard Burke from Blackmill Street, and their addresses are there in detail with the house numbers. So this is a very well organised company of LDF. And then it goes in here, and then Tom has, this is a confidential document now, and this is a document which, a plan of operations by the LDF in the event of an invasion by a foreign force. So it's all in writing what they're going to do in the event of an attack. And that's about a 20-page document, and it goes into great detail how the LDF can help to support the defence of Kilkenny City. And these are just some of the surveyed maps that Tom had in his possession, with some extensive notes written into them and about different orders and regulations. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background of what was happening within Ireland. And of course we know that a lot of guys got very disheartened with the Irish Defence Forces. Lots of them, or some of them, deserted the Irish Army and went over and joined the British Army. And they were only exonerated in the not too distant past from all that. But they were doing what their conscience asked them to do. So our stories, let's start. The first story I have is Bridget Mary Geldart, née O'Brien, born in 1903 from Callan, County Kilkenny. She's the daughter of William O'Brien of Bridge Street, Callan. She's killed in the Blitz bombing on the 5th of May 1941. And she's buried in Barrow in Furness. We'll get the exact date now. So this is the document that this is where she's recorded in the Commonwealth War Grave Commission, because all the civilians who died in the Blitz in England are considered to be casualties of the war as much as the soldier who died in the battlefield. She was the daughter of Lieutenant Peter Geldart, Royal Artillery, who I haven't been able to find much about him. And it says here she was injured on the 5th of May in 1941, that's the correct date, and she was from Hawcoat Lane, and she died on the same day in Artsdale Hospital. So the Germans were actually bombing the borough. Barrow is an inlet. It has a deep sea port, and it also has some series of big steelworks. So the Germans were trying to destroy the capabilities for maritime use of this area here. And you can see some of the large cranes in the background, and this is the type Harcourt Lane and other buildings. Within about a 2-week period, 75 civilians died during the Blitz on that particular town. This is the hospital that she was brought to, North Lonsdale Hospital, and she died on the same day as she was admitted to hospital. And this is her Commonwealth War Grave record. And it's just Fairlawn Lynham, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. William O'Brien, Bridge Street, Callan, Kilkenny, Irish Republic. Sometimes it says Irish Republic, sometimes it says ERA. That's a personal, how the next of kin are actually submitted. And this here is her headstone. Brady, as she was known, has no, it's not a Commonwealth headstone, obviously erected by her husband. And the date is a day earlier than what it is. And her year is a year too young, but like records change. But her headstone is still in good order over there in the cemetery. So when we are talking then about the British Army, it's not all just British. There's Australian, there's Canadians, there's Americans, there's Africans, there's Kilkenny men everywhere and Kilkenny women everywhere within all the forces. It's finding the information is not as easy as it is for World War I. But I have a selection of soldiers and nurses now that I just want to narrate their personal stories. So the first one is Thomas Cooke, able seaman Thomas Cooke, born in 1903 in Kilmacow, County Kilkenny. His wife is Bridget Cooke, née Dunphy, and they're married on the 15th of April 1931 in Kilmacow. He's killed in action, he's drowned at sea actually, the 14th of July 1940, and he's commemorated on Plymouth Naval Memorial on panel 37, column 2. He was a submariner. His ship was HMS Salmon, His Majesty's submarine Salmon. and that's a picture of the actual submarine. It was built in 1933. It was fitted out and completed by 1934 and went into service at that time as a British naval submarine. And he was a crewman on it, and we'll see a bit more about that in a minute. This is his birth record, showing him born in 1903, and his birth is registered in the Union of Waterford in the county of Kilkenny. I'll leave that up to you. But he's a Kilmacow man anyway. Narramore, actually, down in that area there, and you can see his details. So this is his service record on enlistment. He joins up on the 5th of October 1918, so he's actually in the First World War. He's awarded the Service Medal for First World War service. His rank is boy. That's his rank. Boy, because he wasn't old enough to have a proper rank, or he wasn't in long enough to have a proper rank. And you can see there, you can see that he indefatigable, that's not a ship. Every base in the British naval system has a ship's name. So Vivid is not a ship. Vivid is a base, it's a building. So all those names don't necessarily refer to actual ships. He got married, as we said, in 1931 in April, and he marries Bridget. And you can see here that on his marriage cert, Seaman Royal Navy. And I'm sure he probably wore his Royal Navy uniform in Kilmacow that day, even though, you know, maybe it wasn't in uniform, but he didn't try to hide the fact that he was a Royal Navy seaman. It's there. This is his actual service record. It's not that easy to see now, but you can see all the different ships that he served up until the time of his death. This here is his second last ship, Cyclops. Cyclops was his parent ship, and Cyclops was a ship that actually was used to equip and resupply submarines either at sea or at base. He was awarded 2 medals while he was in before World War II. He was awarded a Long Service Good Conduct Medal in 1936, and here you can see this is his his record of his receiving the Victory Medal in after 1918. This is his service record as recorded. You don't get much, as I said, but luckily enough we were able to get a bit more on Thomas. There's his picture. Thomas is this picture put me off. I couldn't understand it, first of all, because what's a naval seaman, which is a private rank, doing with sergeant stripes? But they're not sergeant stripes. Upon further research, they're long good conduct badges. So he got promoted to the rank of Lance Corporal. He'd have to lose those 3 stripes and the associated good conduct pay that went with those stripes. So I'm sure he was very happy to remain as a naval seaman with his good conduct chevrons, and he's wearing his 2 pre-World War II medals here. And over here you can see he has his designation of job, and his job is a torpedo man, loading the torpedoes into the front of the submarine. Salmon had a very good start to the war. It sunk the very first German U-boat that was sunk during World War II on the 4th of December 1939. And as I said already, it was designated as a S-class submarine N65 pattern. This is where it sunk its first German U-boat, here, exactly here. The sinking of U-boat 36. This is the captain of U-boat 36, and it was sunk with all hands at sea as one of the first actions of His Majesty's submarine Salmon during World War II. Here you can see, this is S-36, the submarine that was sunk by HMS Salmon. And here's the crew of submarine Salmon up on deck being paraded. The gallant return, the crew wait to go ashore for special leave after coming back from such a successful mission. Because on that same mission, in this red area here, during the same cruise, they fired 2 German light cruisers, Nuremberg and Leipzig, and they severely damaged both cruisers. This is Leipzig and this is Nuremberg. Both those cruisers had to return to base, and they were out of the war for over a year. So that will tell you how successful that actual patrol was for HMS Salmon. They also, on their 5th patrol, came close to, but were unable to get in range of the Admiral Giger, which is a large German cruiser, but they just couldn't get into a position to discharge their torpedoes, so it escaped. So on their 9th war patrol, their boss then still, and had been from the start, Oscar Bickford, DSO, Distinguished Service Order. He was the commander of the submarine. They were sent out to go on a patrol, and the Admiralty sent them through an unknown German minefield. And they struck a mine and they sunk right there. Obviously their bodies were never reclaimed. The wreck was found in 2008, so it is now known exactly where the wreck is, just there. And these are just a list of a few of the people that went to the bottom with our man, and you can see there was 40 of them on that day actually went to the bottom with the boat. He's recorded on the memorial in Portsmouth and Tower Hill, on the panels there. So that's the only place, if you want to remember honor his memory, is go there. But he's also recorded on the Kilkenny the Second World War Memorial over at the train station. The next person, John Anthony Kirwan, Sergeant. Air gunner, born 1919, aged 25, from Dungarvaan, County Kilkenny. His father was Michael, his mother was Bridget. He was in the Air Force Reserve. He was killed in action on the 8th of July, 1944. He's buried in Leggetsrath Communal Cemetery, France. He's a Lancaster bomber gunner, and that's his the unit designation. He was in 49th Squadron, and he was a rear gunner. So this is the back of the Lancaster. He was here, pointing back the way. He's credited with actually taking out 2 heavy German fighters during his time, and he was awarded, we'll see in a minute, he was awarded the medal. So this is Frixton. This is the air base which he was launched from on most of his missions, and particularly the missions that we're talking about. But earlier in February 1944, they had a mid-air collision with a German Junkers airplane, and it took off the last third of their wing. And they still managed to get back to their base somewhat safely, and they landed, and you can still hear that I'd be looking up at it too with wonder and pointing at it. So that's the whole crew. Sergeant Kirwan is in there. I can't tell you which man he is, but that's them thanking their lucky stars that they made it home. And John Kirwan was awarded, this air gunner has taken part in, think about this, 21 night bombing sorties over Germany, 10 of which have been over Berlin. His skill and determination have carried him into these battles without fear and have enabled him to account for 2 twin-engined enemy night fighters shot down in flames since the beginning of this year. He's an inspiration to his fellow airmen. I strongly recommend the award of Distinguished Flying Medal. And that was awarded in April, and this is 2 of the type of bombers that he shot down himself. And this is the crew of his Lancaster: G.E. Ball, Sergeant E. Wardman, G. Miller, J. Kernahan, John Anthony Kirwan, G.A. Ray, and G.J.W. Parkinson. Their job on the night in question was to bomb known V1 launch sites belonging to the German Luftwaffe, or from this area here, St. Leggetsrath. I'm badly pronouncing that, I apologise. This was a V1 launching pad, and they were just landing randomly on London. And you can see here the results of some of the bombing. It's very hard to be accurate, but it was deemed to be a successful attack. But on their way back, they were intercepted by a new form of German light nighttime fighter, and they were shot down. And this is the wreckage on the ground. And this is a further picture of the wreckage on the ground of the aircraft crash site. And he is buried now in this cemetery here. It's a very nice little French cemetery, and this is the line of himself and his fellow crewmen. They're the only Commonwealth War Grave Commission soldiers in that graveyard from my research. His family took the opportunity to write a personal inscription on the base of his headstone, and it reads, "Ever in our memory, may he rest in peace, Dad and Ma'am." Our next personal story is 2716885 Guardsman Martin Brennan, born 1905, Leggetsrath, County Kilkenny. son of Daniel and Mary Brennan, killed in action the 13th of April 1944 in Italy, buried in Florence War Cemetery in Italy. Here you can see his birth records, Leggetsrath, and he's one of a good few kids, and we'll see that in the family, in the census there, you can see there's quite a good few siblings, and his damn man. This is his picture, his guardsman's photograph, and this is where he's positioned on the night of the 4th of February 1944. So you can see the front line. In the salient here, this bit that bulges out, I'll show it to you better now. In here, this is the salient up close. Martin is with the Irish Guards. This is the 1IG, Irish Guards. They're within that salient. There's a German, so a double X is a division. So that's a whole division. 2 divisions attacking this salient, and it pushes the salient back down to this dotted line over 2 days. Within this battle, he's actually missing, presumed dead. But it turns out that he was actually taken POW. But here I'd like to show you here, about a month before he was presumed missing, he drew 400 lira in his wages. So it's just a record, the only record I could find to show that of what he had done at the time. Here you can see he's actually listed as being missing with a few other of his friends, colleagues, I would imagine, missing from the 4th to the 2nd, 44 in Italy. But then it comes back, the records are updated. Previously reported missing, believed prisoner of war, now reported died whilst a prisoner of war, a guardsman, Martin Brennan. And his date is listed as being between the 13th and the 15th of April 44. So he obviously died of wounds or something while a German POW. This is his grave record, and again his parents wrote on his cross, it's not a cross, his grave marker, "We have loved him in life, let us not forget him in death, may he rest in peace." This is the graveyard, Florence graveyard, and this is his headstone as it exists now, and you can't read it, but you can see that the final inscription is down here. So a Commonwealth grave marker always has a unit badge, number, rank, name, regiment, age if known, date of death if known, a cross or symbol of your religion. That's generally a cross, or it could be a Star of David, or it could be whatever religious symbology you wanted there. It could be none if you wanted none, and then a personal inscription from the family. Here's the funny thing though about Martin. One of his brothers, John, died in World War I, 1918. One of his brothers, Daniel, died on the 28th of June, 1922, the first day of our Civil War. And another one of his brothers, Brother Kieran, dies as a POW in Malaya in 1944. 4 brothers, 3 wars. Amazing story. Personal history. Elizabeth McTiernan ní Packham, known as Bobby. Auxiliary something service, I'll come back to it in a minute. Born in 1923 in Battle in Sussex. She married John McTiernan. She moved to and set up a business at 30 John Street in 1951. Anybody remember the shop? Yeah? Willie's here, by the way, because I had a chat with him one day. He was just getting out of the river. And I got chatting. I said to him, I'm doing a lecture on World War II. And he said, my ma was in World War II. He said, send me on some stuff. And I got it, and I put it together kind of the last couple of days. She served as an intercept operator in Bew Manor, Station Y, 1942 to 1945. Very secret, very important job. Their job was to transcribe German messages, and they were couriered to Bletchley Park for decoding. And Elizabeth died on the 7th of May 2014. So the Auxiliary Territorial Service is what the ATS were. So they were a ladies' part of the British Army, and they filled vital roles throughout the whole war. And the war that they did in Station Y and Bletchley Park, we'll never know. Actually, they didn't know what they were doing, really. They knew what they were transcribing, but they didn't know where they were going, because when it was leaving Station Y, it was not yet decoded. It was garbled German or whatever it was, And this is the working conditions in Station Y. You can see all the ladies there are diligently transcribing stuff that they're hearing or after getting recordings of. And this here is Elizabeth in her ATS uniform. And this is her, Willie will tell you, I can't remember the dog's name, but this is also the working area within which they worked. She has a personal record written, and they stayed in a little village just outside where they were working, and they were in what did she call herself, fairly atrocious conditions. There was no heating in the house. It was the pipes would freeze during the winter, and that the food was quite scarce and bad. And but they would, if they had 36 hours off, they would go on a little adventure, get on the train and go somewhere and stay in hostels and things like that. But one high point for us was when Glenn Miller visited the American troops, and they got to go to they got to hear Glenn Miller play live. This is Elizabeth after being awarded a medal and a certificate by the then Prime Minister of Great Britain, Gordon Brown. And this is the village. Now, I got pictures of the village, which don't do justice to the way Elizabeth describes the village. But this is Corn Village, which was quite close to Station Y, where she worked. So you never know who's living around you and what their stories are. Sure you don't. So the next story I'm going to go through is Air Gunner Patrick Power, born in 1920 in Greens Hill, Kilkenny. His parents were Michael and Bridget Power. He was a Lancaster bomber, rear and upper mid gunner, and also photographer. He died on the 30th of November 1989. This is a picture of him here with his colleagues. And here you can see we actually have, and I have to thank his son for loaning me this today, his logbook from all the different flights he was on. And this is just one flight week, and it's from the 4th to the 3rd 44 to the 15th to the 3rd 44. And you can see he was in with different pilots, Warrant Officer Smith, Warrant Officer Roster. And these are all the different pilots of the planes he was out with. And a rear gunner, he was a rear gunner, all that. Air firing, 25 hits, 30 caliber, or 30 minutes, I presume. Cine camera gun, so he was operating the camera, cine camera gun. And you can see dual and solo, cine camera gun. Total hours, day 9 hours 26, night 0. Certified correct by his boss. And total time, 24 hours and 36 minutes. So that's and he was stationed in Edge Hill. Here you can see he was the rear and upper. So the upper, you can't see it in this picture, upper mid gunner. He did over 30 sorties. This is a picture of him in his number ones. And this uniform marking here to me indicates, to me, a warrant officer. He's either an officer there, or he retires as a flight lieutenant, which is an officer. But you'd usually have two wings if you were a flight officer, and I can't see a second wing there, but he's already carrying medals, so he's obviously well decorated as well. This is a group picture of him and his platoon, and here he is. Now, after he'd done his 30 sorties, he was allowed to no longer fly. You wouldn't mind not flying over enemy after 30 times there, and he became part of the PE staff in the base. So that's. And he ends up as the president of St. Canice's Credit Union. And I'm going to say 1973. Here's another life story. He carried that with him his whole life and probably never told anybody. Personal history. Airman Patrick Healy. He listed in 1942 in the Australian Air Force. He's born in the 18th of March 1899 in Kilkenny City. He's discharged to manage a herd of cows in 1944. So this is a man with a story, right? So, like, he's 42 when he enlists anyway, for starters. That's kind of old, isn't it? And you can see there, he's enlisted in Perth. He's 42 and 10 months, so practically 43. He's married with 6 children under 15 years of age. He's from Kilkenny, Ireland. He's Roman Catholic, and he's a dairy farmer. And he gets... I think he enlists. He doesn't get conscripted, because there's no conscription, if I remember correctly. He's 5 foot 6 3/4. He's 166 pounds. He's fair hair, and he has 2 vaccination scars on his right arm. And he lost a 3rd finger of his left hand. Now, there you go. But he's in there in 42 to 44, and then he applies for discharge because he has an ex-pensioner looking after his herd of 26 cows and 6 heifers and 3 horses, right? And he has a contract to supply 35 gallons of milk per day to the Australian Army. And he feels that if he doesn't get released to go back to the farm, he'll have to sell the herd, and the government will be at the loss of his milk. So the government send an inspector to check his farm, and he discovers that, well, he wanted to report that the herd of cows are in good shape, and he makes a good effort to fill his quota, and his large family are in his care, and this man has been worked to a standstill. And he recommends that he be released from army service. And this is the letter which releases him from his army service, and his character is said to be very good, and his proficiency was satisfactory. And his address on discharge was Jones Street, Osborne Park, Australia. So if you want to look after a herd of cows, the army might look good on you. Next one is Private Patrick Breen, Australian Army, born in December 1902 in Ballykeeffe, County Kilkenny. He's the son of Daniel and Mary Breen from Ballykeeffe, Cuffs Grange. He died of disease as a POW on the 22nd of August 1943. He's buried in Tadbuyast War Cemetery in Miramar. This is his picture. Private Breen is another, he's not a young man either, but the fact that you can see there in his service record, he's 39 years, 6 months old, and his birth, I've already mentioned his date of birth, and that's his picture there. He's a very good, hardy looking man. This is the certificate true copy of his record, which shows his next of kin being his mother, Mary, and it says Butt Green, but that's wrong. Ballykeeffe, County Kilkenny, and his mother, his hair was light brown, and he was taken a POW by the Japanese in February 42, and he dies in a POW camp. These are his awards, his medals that were awarded to him, and all the soldiers I've talked about so far would have been awarded medals, but this is the first man that I actually could find the record of the different X's showing the medals that he actually was awarded. This is the site of his burial ground, Miramar, and the Commonwealth headstones over there cannot be the same as the Portland stone ones in Europe, because the weather will deteriorate them too quickly. So they're flat stone like, and the cemetery can be subjected to flooding. So this is the best way to maintain the graveyards without kind of future-proofing them. So that's the cross of sacrifice. That's in every Commonwealth war graveyard, whether World War I or World War II. And here you can see these are the original grave markers that were used in that cemetery, and they were used, all made from railway sleepers. The next one I'm going to talk about is Private Michael Slattery from the Royal Sussex Regiment, and he's from 52 Lord Edward Street, Kilkenny. Born the 19th of November 1897, husband of Catherine Slattery ní Cal, and they were married on the 1st of the 10th, 1932. He was given a Class A release in the 17th of September 1945, and he was discharged to Class Z in 1954. Hard to get out. This is his picture and his service record there, and this is his actual record of service. So you can see up here, Kilkenny, parish of St. Canice's, but spelt phonically, K-A-N-I-C-S-A-S. If you have a British, it's a young guy from, I don't know, South London or something, trying to spell St. Canice, do you know, he spelt it phonically, and that's what's on the paper. And you can see here that he enlisted for the duration of the war, and you can see here when he enlisted, he had previous war service in the Royal Air Force in World War I. These were his 3 regiments: the Royal Sussex Regiment, the Queen's Regiment, and the Royal Irish Fusiliers. And this is a record showing all his movements. We won't go through them all, but it just shows you there that he managed to survive the war and to come out the far end and get demobilized at the end. And here you can see discharged, and they didn't fully discharge him until 1954. And he was born in the 19th of the 11th, 1897. So he was like 57 years old before the British government released him fully from his war service. This is what I mentioned earlier on. You can see his wife's name, but because some of his children may still be alive, I don't know how it's engineered, but you won't get records of people who could possibly still be alive, or at least I haven't been able to get them. And this is just his marriage cert to show when he got married in 1932. Personal history of James O'Brien, the Rifle Brigade from Castlecomer, born 1911, son of Patrick and Mary O'Brien, Castlecomer, killed in action on the 21st of August 1944, buried in St. Dacier Cemetery, France. He was in the Desert Rats, the 7th Armoured Division, and he was in the 1st Battalion of the Rifle Brigade. He was awarded the MM, a Medal for Gallantry, in that he attacked in Sidi Salah during the night of the 6th, 7th of February. He accompanied BSM Jarvis when attacked by 2 enemy tanks. He ran up to the tanks on the move and fired through the slits with his rifle, wounding the crews, who thereupon surrendered. So he single-handedly, with a 303 rifle, attacked 2 Italian tanks, stuck his rifle into the slit and pulled the trigger a number of times, and the 2 tanks surrendered to him. Brave man. And for that he got his MM. This is like the tanks that he attacked. You can see that the 1st Rifle Brigade were in the 22nd Armoured Brigade, which was part of the Desert Rats, the 7th Armoured Division. And then they moved to France, and this is a picture of the 1st Battalion making an assault in France after the D-Day landings. And here you can see, unfortunately, listed as killed in action is Sergeant O'Brien on the 21st of the 8th, 1944. So they landed around the 2nd to the 7th of June 1944 after D-Day +2, and he survived out there for 2 months in action. Sergeant James O'Brien, MM, 1st Battalion Rifle Brigade, son of Patrick and Mary Brown of Castlecomer. And this is just showing that, right, he was buried in a temporary burial site near Fervesque, F-E-R-V-A-Q-U, Fercuse, France. So he was disinterred and then reinterred in the cemetery that he's in now. So I've been able to figure out where the original, so this here is known as the Falaise Pocket. Has anybody ever heard of the Falaise Pocket and the attack? So he was on the extremity of that attack. This attack is going on at that time. He's part of an action in this little Fersique here. I have an arrow pointing to it, and he's actually buried here in the cemetery. So he's part of the whole Falaise Pocket assault on that surrounded German army. This is his grave in fond memory of Jim, son of Patrick and Mary O'Brien, Castlecomer era, R.I.P. That's what's on his personal inscription on his headstone. This is his cemetery, and this is his actual headstone. So I don't know if anybody from the family ever got to visit. It's a bit more likely than going to visit a World War I as a sort of a son or daughter, you know, but at least, you know, when you go over, you have the knowledge that your parents, and in the Second World War, you did not have to pay. This was done, I want to say free of charge by the British government. They'd want to do it. But in World War I, after World War I, you had to pay 3D per letter to have an engravement done on your next of kin's headstone. Personal history: Sergeant Patrick Conroy, Signal Corps, Danesfort, County Kilkenny, born the 26th of March 1902, son of Michael and Anne Conroy from Danesfort, died of illness the 9th of August 1945. He's buried at Death Valley Camp, or was originally. He was taken prisoner at the surrender of Singapore. He was a sergeant in the Royal Corps of Signals. Mrs. Conroy of 48 Salisbury Terrace, Darlington, was his wife, I presume, and that was where he's next of kin. Being the signalman, they would have been looking after all the signal depots in Singapore, and it is known as probably the worst surrender by a British general ever, under very poor terms. He could have fought on a lot longer and so on and so forth, but there are 5 records of Kilkenny soldiers that I found, but we're only going to do one of them tonight. The guys were kept in seriously bad conditions. These are just the names of the guys that were taken with him, and he's in there. And you can see there, and it just goes on to show that previously reported prisoners of war, now reported died, and he's in there being reported dead. And you can see all the other guys. So, but he died in August 45, so probably a month before the armistice. And his death, he died of malnutrition and beriberi. Sergeant Conroy, malnutrition, beriberi, and malaria. So he had a poor old end. Terrible pity, but this is just showing you then where there were concentration lifts for burial, and this is what they were doing. They were building railway lines for the Japanese through the Death Valley there, and this is his graveyard. And this is his actual headstone. In loving memory of a loving husband and father, wife Rhonda and daughter Patsy. And this is, we're coming on now and getting pretty close to the last bit. This is talking about our nurses. So I had to, when I was looking, I didn't, you know, like, there's more to it than just being a soldier in World War II. So I went into the Queen Alexandra Imperial Military Nursing Service Reserve and found that we had 17 nurses from Kilkenny who were part of Queen Alexandria's Imperial Military Nursing Service Reserve and fought, not in fight, tended to injured soldiers, either in the UK or in France or some other theatre of war. So this is Mary Virginia Moloney from Thomastown, County Kilkenny, and she was commissioned as a staff nurse in the Queen Alexandra, I'm only saying this one last time, Queen Alexander's Imperial Military Nursing Service Reserve. It's a mouthful. And she died in 1996 while living in Worthing, West Sussex. Margaret Brophy, she was from Kilderry, Carrigeen, Kilderry, County Kilkenny. She was residing in Kilkenny in 1946, and she was commissioned in 1942 into the Queen Alexander's Nursing Service. Margaret Esther Carty from Mooncoin, County Kilkenny. She was registered as a first-class passenger from Southampton, and she went to Java, where she had been contracted to disembark in Singapore. Her occupation was listed as nurse, and she then took up permanent residence in Borneo, the Kilkenny girl after the war. So these are just some nurses then who were registered as staff nurses in the UK during World War II. Kathleen Booth from Main Street, Gorn. Ellen Hilda Going from Ballykeeffe, Kilkenny. You have Mary Sharp from Kilmacow, Whitehall Post Office, Gorn, County Kilkenny. Kathleen Mary Lavery from New Park, Castlecomer Road, Kilkenny. And you have Bridget Sapcoat from Balaclava, Graigue, County Kilkenny. And Mary Frances Grace from 42 Black Mill Street, Kilkenny. And now we'll move on to our last man. This is one of our priests, and this is a very interesting man. Father Stapleton, Joseph Stapleton from Tullibane House, Callan. He was a seminarian, one of 13 World War II British chaplains who either trained in Kilkenny, in St. Kieran's, or were from Kilkenny. So he was a priest in the First World War, and he stayed in service. Because if you look here, you'll see he served from May 1916 in France and Flanders, from the Somme to the Third Ypres. After the armistice, he was in the army of the Rhine, Silesia and East Prussia from 1919 to 1922. He continued to serve in the British Army post-war in Egypt, Palestine and the Sudan throughout the 1920s and 30s. In 1940, he was appointed to Senior Chaplain Roman Catholic to the Middle East Command, and he was awarded an OBE, an Officer of the British Empire, for his services in the Middle East, 1941 to 44. In January 44, he became the Senior Catholic Chaplain to the 21st Army Group. He's a very interesting man. His brother, Daniel Stapleton, was the chief explosives manufacturer for the IRA in Kilkenny from 1919 to 1923. He goes on to become a chief superintendent in the Garda Síochána, and I wonder did they ever meet for dinner afterwards. One of them being a lifelong chaplain in the British Army, and the other one being somebody who was happily blowing up the British forces here. Daniel Stapleton was a famous, he hurled for Kilkenny. He had a pharmacy on High Street. Is that where it is now? Yeah. And he had an explosive making factory out on the Dunningston Road near Tullerone from 1919 to 1922. Depending on the type of explosives or what you needed the explosives for, it had 3 code names: Warflower, Cheddar cheese, and Paxo, right? So if you want, this is how they got on. I don't know. and he then advised the Irish Defence Forces in the Second World War how to make explosives. He had great knowledge, and he was a chief superintendent in the Guards by then. But so 2 brothers, one of them a senior, Joseph, he dies on the golf course in Dublin, age 60, and at the time he's the cure at the CC in Clonakilty in Cork. I wonder, did these parishioners know that he was an OBE or an officer of the British Empire? Anyway, folks, I did say to Pat I'd take about 50 minutes. I've gone over time by about 4 minutes, and I'd like to say thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.